let us read deeper. From all this, the one great fact emerges. I think today, Shilpa can read.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, Rangadan, I'm reading.
Go
From
ahead.
all this, the one great fact emerges that the very nature of our mind is ignorance, not an absolute omniscience, but a limited and conditional knowledge of being limited by realization of its present, a memory of its past, an inference of its future, and unconditional, therefore, by a temporal and successive view of its itself and its experiences. If real existence is a temporal eternity, then the mind has not the knowledge of real being, for even its own past it loses its in the vague of oblivion except for the little that memory holds. It has no possession of its future, which is withheld from it in a great blank of ignorance. It has only a knowledge of its presence, changing from moment to moment in a helpless succession of names, forms, happenings, the march of flux of a cosmic kinesis, kinesis which is too vast for its control or its comprehension. On the other hand, if real existence is a time transcending eternity, the mind is still more ignorant of it, for it only knows the little of it that it can itself seize from moment to moment by a fragmentary experience of its surface, self manifestation in time and space.
Okay. So, what Shilpa is saying is that our mind, he has already examined. Na? He has said that we don't know from where we have come. Nobody remembers their birth. They are told about it by their parents. And so they don't remember from where they have come. They don't remember past lives. They don't know the future also. So there is a lot of ignorance. And about the physical world, a little bit around us we know. But we don't know much that the science is discovering. All these things we don't know. So basically, the nature of our normal mind is ignorance. But it is not total ignorance because we have little bit of knowledge. Okay? So it's a halfway house. The real ignorance is in matter because there is no knowledge at all there. And as soon as the life starts coming, life starts reacting to the environment, and there is a little bit of consciousness. You can use the word consciousness, semi consciousness, or sleeping consciousness, but not knowledge really. But knowledge starts coming at the animal level, the higher animals, they have some sort of knowledge of the environment. They know what to eat. They know what not to eat. They know their own species. Things like that. Very small amount of knowledge. When it comes to man, there is a little more knowledge, but still largely ignorant. That's what he's saying. And we don't know. And is the physical world the only existence? If the physical world is the only existence, then our knowledge is limited and it will always remain limited. But if there is something beyond our understanding, there are spiritual truths, then naturally our ignorance is quite proved. That's what he's saying. So let's read each sentence and see whether it's clear. Okay? From all this, the previous discussion, from all this, the one great fact emerges that the very nature of our mind is ignorance. To remind you again, we don't know our past, we don't know from where we have come, even the memory is only a little bit. We can't remember when we were 2 years old, 3 years old, we can't remember. Okay. Sometimes people do remember when they are 4 years old. My memory goes back only to, I remember, around 5 or 6. I remember I went to a school which I did not like at all in my town in Andhra, okay? But apart from that, hardly anything. But I remember at the age of 6 when I came to the ashram, my impressions of some of the ashram things are there. But it is vague, it's not very clear. So, ignorance is there. That's the very nature of our mind is ignorance. Not an absolute nescience. You can pronounce the word nescience also as nescience. Okay? Nescience. Sa. And you need not say sh. But some people say nescience. So it's all right. You can say both. But a limited and conditioned knowledge of being limited by the realization of its present, we know our present, a memory of the past, and an inference of the future. So we know very little about right now. In the present, yes, we know something. Now that also we don't know fully. But in the memory of the past, that also memory is vague. And the future, we know nothing, we can only make an inference. A little bit we know, na? Because tomorrow, let us say, I have an appointment tomorrow with the doctor, so I know about the future. I also know that in 1 month's time, I will go to the Seychelles Islands for a holiday. So we know about the future a little bit, but not too much. Okay, so that's what they're saying. Therefore, conditioned, therefore, by a temporal and successive view of itself and its experiences. So all our memory is one event plus one event plus one event plus one event plus one. We don't see all together. That's an important thing. It is temporal and successive view of itself and its experiences. If real existence is a temporal eternity, then the mind has not the knowledge of real being. Okay, that's what he's saying. If real existence is a temporal eternity, if it is eternal but in time, okay, in the past it is eternally. The past is going to the absolute origin of things. There is no origin actually. It's eternal. Then we don't know anything. That's what Singh is saying. Then the mind has not the knowledge of real being. For even its own past, it loses in the vague of oblivion. Shilpa, the word vague, you don't need to pronounce the GU, okay? It's vague. English language is like that. The vague of oblivion. Oblivion, forgetfulness, okay? Except for the little that memory holds. It has no possession. Archana ji, good morning. Temporal and successive. If real existence
Good
is
morning,
a temporal,
Advaita.
yes, good morning. Srimati is saying that if the eternity in the physical world is eternal, if there's no starting point and no ending point, then also we don't know anything because we don't know the past. And loses in the vague of oblivion, except for the little that memory holds. It has no possession of its future, which is withheld from it in a great blank of ignorance. We know nothing about the future. But interestingly, as your consciousness grows more and more, wider and wider, even the future starts revealing itself to you. Because in the physical world, there is rigidity of karma, rigidity of laws. So if you can see that, then you can see also what is going to happen in the future. So in fact, it can go to a great extent. Sri Aurobindo had said in 1950, even earlier, 1947, he said that the partition of India must go. Now we can see very clearly that the partition, the annihilation of partition is in India, Pakistan and India, is going to become a reality. 75 years, no, why 75, even more. Nearly 80 years he could see the future. Mother also saw the future 30 years. So when you go up in consciousness, you can see the future. But when you are at our level, level 1, you can't see the future at all. Vague idea we have. Okay. It has only a knowledge of the present, changing from moment to moment in a helpless succession of names, forms, happenings. The march or flux of a cosmic kinesis, which is too vast for its control or its comprehension. There is movement in the physical world, and we know only a little bit about our own movements. But we don't know what's happening in other parts of Pondicherry, let alone India, let alone in the physical world, let alone in the cosmos. What is happening, we don't know. Maybe some stars are disintegrating, but we know nothing about all that. Stars are being created also, but we know nothing about that. Total ignorance. It has only a knowledge of its present, changing from moment to moment. So, my knowledge. Yeah. Changing from moment to moment in a helpless succession of names, forms, happenings. the march or flux of a cosmic kinesis, which is too vast for its control or its comprehension. On the other hand, if real existence is a time transcending unity, not in the physical world, but the reality is something far above the physical world, then also the mind is still more ignorant of it. In any case, even if the physical world is the only reality, there is ignorance. And if it is the real existence is only above the physical world, that also we know nothing at all. Even more we are ignorant. On the other hand, if real existence is a time transcending eternity, the mind is still more ignorant of it. For it only knows the little of it that it can itself seize from moment to moment by fragmentary experience of its surface self-manifestation in time and space. So time and space belongs to the physical world, because as soon as you go to level 2 in the spiritual planes of consciousness, time disappears, space becomes psychological. Okay. Now we can read the next one. If then mind. These are all very small paras. So I think Archana, they can read that, and the third one, Sunki will read today. Only 3 of you are there today. Oh, Gitanjali also has come. Anyway, Archana Di, if you have got the text, you can read.
Rangada, I will need 5 more minutes. So, Sunki, can you read it, please?
Pardon?
Sunki?
Yes,
Sunki will
I
read, Rangada.
Okay. Sunki, you read.
Yes.
If then mind.
If then mind is all, or if the apparent mind in us is the index of the nature of our being, we can never be anything more than an ignorance fleeting through time and catching at knowledge at a most scanty and fragmentary fashion. But if there is a power of self-knowledge beyond the mind, which is timeless in essence and can look on time, perhaps with a simultaneous all-relating view of the past, present, and future, but in any case as a circumstance of its own timeless being, then we have 2 powers of consciousness, knowledge and ignorance, the Vedantic Vidya and Avidya. These 2 must be, then, either different and unconnected powers, separately born as well as diverse in their action, separately self-existent in an eternal dualism, or else, if there is a connection between them, it must be that consciousness as knowledge knows its timeless self and sees time within itself, while consciousness as ignorance is a partial and superficial action of the same knowledge which sees rather itself in time, veiling itself in its own conception of a temporal being, and can only be the removal of the veil, return to eternal self-knowledge.
He is saying that if the reality is above the physical world, transcendental, then 2 possibilities are there. The first possibility is that they are unconnected. Spirit and matter are unconnected. Then you have the Mayavada philosophy. It's possible for human beings to experience them as unconnected. Okay, but there's also another possibility that there's a connection between the 2. That's what he's discussing. And if it is connected between the 2, then what is the conclusion we can come to? That's what he's discussing in the small para. We'll look at it sentence by sentence. If then mind is all, or if the apparent mind in us is the index of the nature of our being, we can never be anything more than an ignorance, fleeting through time and catching at knowledge in the most scanty and fragmentary fashion. In other words, if the physical world is the only one, then we are bound to ignorance always. That's what he's saying. Catching only knowledge in a most scanty and fragmentary fashion. That is the what is happening in the science. Huh? But slowly science also is going above. But until now, if you think that matter is the only reality, your knowledge is always scanty. It can become more and more at the physical level, but still it is not the full knowledge. And fragmentary fashion. You know only little bits. Little by little, it's increasing. But if there is a power of self-knowledge beyond mind. Is there one? That's what he's asking. Beyond mind, which is timeless in essence and can look on time, perhaps with a simultaneous all-relating view of past, present, and future, but in any case, as a circumstance of its own timeless being, then we have two powers of consciousness, knowledge and ignorance, the Vedantic Vidya and Avidya. So this is the second supposition. He is discussing at the mental level, and he is not saying that, yes, it does exist. He is telling you, he is taking you by the hand and leading you step by step. First, he says that if the physical world is the only reality, then ignorance is permanent. Very clear. There's no other way. Okay? And if the reality, the real truth of things is above the mind, then what happens? There are again two possibilities. One is you can think that knowledge and ignorance are two separate things without any connection. Okay? And the third possibility, they are connected. That's what he's examining now one by one. Okay? So if they are two, then we have two powers of consciousness, knowledge and ignorance, the Vedantic Vidya and Avidya. These two must be then either different and unconnected powers, separately born as well as diverse in their action, separately self-existent in an eternal dualism. They are always two separate things. The world is made up of two things, knowledge and ignorance, reality and unreality. Or else, another possibility, if there is a connection between them, it must be this, that consciousness as knowledge knows its timeless self and sees time within itself, while consciousness as ignorance is a partial and superficial action of the same knowledge, which sees rather itself in time, veiling itself in its own conception of temporal being, and can only by the removal of the veil return to eternal self-knowledge. So, if the I'm summarizing the whole para because or else, he's got so many different arguments. First argument, if the physical world is the only reality, like the materialist thinks, then your ignorance is bound to be permanent. You will never know the reality because science is knowing the reality more and more, but does it know everything? Not yet. Will it ever get full knowledge? No, even of the physical world. Number one. Number two, suppose the physical world is not the only reality and there is a reality above the physical world, then there are two possibilities. Either the two worlds, spirit and matter, knowledge and ignorance, okay, Vidya and Avidya are either connected or unconnected. If it is unconnected, you have the Mayavada theory, the Buddhistic theory, that they are two separate things altogether. And if you want the reality, you have to leave the lower and go to the higher. That's the conclusion that you will come to. Okay. There is knowledge full and here is ignorance full. That is also complete and eternal, and this also is complete and eternal, the ignorance. But is there a third possibility? There is a connection between the two. That is Srimdo's philosophy. There is a connection between the two. And if that connection is there, then the human soul can experience the knowledge of the higher plane, and then it sees time within itself. Okay. And if it sees knowledge within itself, but it has the capacity to also come down and see itself in time. Time is outside itself. Okay. So this is what he's saying. The higher level, you can see the one, and time is within itself. Or if you come down into the physical world, then there is you are in time and space and you are seeing the many. That's the other possibility. So that's what he's saying. And then what is to be done? If you want the reality, you have to remove the veil that is not allowing you to go from one level to the other, and then you can go. And that is yoga. Okay. So this is what he's saying. He discussed all the different aspects. Now we can go to the third para. Today's third para. We have time, plenty of time. So Gitanjali, since you are there today and if you have the text, you can read. I don't know if she is there, but she is there.
Rangada, I will.
Okay, you can
Gitanjali
read.
will
I'll read
after
the
this.
next one. Yeah.
It is from, in fact, if we look now.
That no, it would be irrational. For it would be irrational.
Okay.
Page
Yes,
524.
yes, Rangada, I've got it. For
Okay.
it would be irrational to suppose that the superconscious knowledge is so aloof and separate as to be incapable of knowing time and space and causality and their works. For then it would be only another kind of ignorance, the blindness of the absolute being answering to the blindness of the temporal being as positive pole and negative pole of a conscious existence, which is incapable of knowing all itself, but either knows only itself and does not know its works, or knows only its works and does not know itself. An absurdly symmetrical equipollence in mutual rejection. From the larger point of view, the ancient Vedantic, we must conceive of ourselves not as a dual being, but as one conscious existence with a double phase of consciousness. One of them is conscient or partly conscient in our mind, the other superconscient to mind. One, a knowledge situated in time, works under its conditions and for that purpose puts its self-knowledge behind it. The other, timeless, works out with mastery and knowledge its own self-determined conditions of time. One knows itself only by its growth in time experience. The other knows its timeless self and consciously manifests itself in time experience.
Yeah, in time experience. Okay. So now he is going further. So for it would be irrational to suppose that the superconscious knowledge is so aloof and separate as to be incapable of knowing time and space and causality and their works. In other words, he's saying that he is discussing the last possibility that he has discussed in the previous para. He's saying that there is a connection. And if there is a connection, then it would be irrational to suppose that the superconscious knowledge, the one in the transcendental, is so aloof and separate as to be incapable of knowing time and space and causality and their works. This is the. So, is he saying that Mayavada is irrational? He is not saying that. Because the Mayavadans think that the transcendent and the physical world, the timeless and time, are two different things. They are starting from there. Therefore, they are not irrational. But Srimni is saying that suppose you consider that there is a connection between the two, then it is irrational. Okay? His arguments are very subtle, and so he is saying if we take the last condition, last hypothesis that I have discussed, that there is a connection between the two, then it is irrational to suppose that the superconscious knowledge is aloof and separate, so as to be incapable of knowing time and space. In other words, there must necessarily be a connection between the two, because the soul is capable of knowing either the transcendent or the physical world. And if it is like that, how can it be possible that there is no connection between the two? If there is no connection between the two, how can the soul experience the upper and the lower? It's not possible. That's what he's saying. There has to be a connection. Or it would be irrational to suppose that the superconscious knowledge above is so aloof and separate as to be incapable of knowing time and space and causality. Time and space and causality, the physical world. Very clear. Okay? And their works and all the things that are happening in the physical world. For then, it would be only another kind of ignorance. If it is like that, it is another kind of ignorance. The blindness of the absolute being answering to the blindness of the temporal being has positive pole and negative pole of a conscious existence which is incapable of knowing all itself, but either knows only itself and does not know its works, or knows only its works and does not know itself. An absurdly symmetrical equipollence. The word equipollence means of equal power. Condition of having equal power or force. So, this is what the Mayavadins are denying. The Buddhists also deny that there is no equivalence. The physical world is unreal and you have to go down. But Srimbe is considering the possibility that there is a connection. And if there is a connection, how is it that they are unconnected? You are supposing that there is a connection. So then there necessarily must be a continuity. That's what his answer is. An absurdly symmetrical equivalence. It's in mutual rejection. Now he is saying that we will not accept we'll accept the third possibility of there being connection. But the others are saying there is no connection. They agree that there is a higher knowledge and a lower knowledge, but they are unconnected. Okay. The materialist is saying there is no higher knowledge. The ascetic is saying there is no lower knowledge. And Srimbe is saying that there is both. But there is a connection also. In other words, what the Mayavadins are saying, that if you are in the physical world, you will never know the reality. You have to go to the higher level to know the reality. Srimbe is saying that, sorry, even in the physical world, when you are there, it is possible to know the reality. Because but it is a progressive thing. A yogi knows much more than a normal man, and a supermaterial race will know even more, and he will be able to know both. That's what he is saying. He is actually forecasting, not here, but afterwards he says that. So, mutual rejection is the chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. Okay, chapter 2 and chapter 3. Mutual rejection. The ascetic is rejecting the physical world, and the materialist is rejecting the higher world. We don't accept that. That's what Srimbe is saying. From the larger point of view, the ancient Vedantic view, we must conceive of ourselves not as a dual being, but as one conscious existence with a double phase of consciousness. One of them is conscient or partly conscient in our mind, the other superconscient to mind. In other words, man is capable, the human soul is capable of going from one to the other. It's possible. They are not opposites. Even if you go up, you can also come down. One, and knowledge situated in time works under its conditions, and for that purpose puts its self-knowledge behind it. So, the human soul is capable of knowing the many in the physical world, and when it is knowing the many, it has put away the capacity to see the one, but it has put it away. It is not using it. But when it goes to the knowledge of the one, he is putting away, the human soul is putting away the, it is there. It's not that it is not there. It is there, but he's putting it in the background of his mind. If you have two instruments, you are using one instrument at a time. But Srimbe is saying that it is possible to use both the instruments at a time. That's what he's saying. Okay. A double phase of consciousness, one of them conscient or partly conscient in the mind, the other superconscious in the mind. One, and knowledge situated in time, which is the scientific knowledge, mental knowledge, works under its conditions, okay, and for that purpose puts in self-knowledge behind it. Self-knowledge is the higher knowledge, and you are putting it behind it. The other, timeless, works out with mastery and knowledge its own self-determined conditions of time. Note that. So when you are at the higher level, you yourself have caused the lower. There is a connection between the two. The higher is not something separate and different. It is itself created the lower, and it wants to enjoy the one as well as the many. So it is not something separate. It is created by itself. One knows itself only by its growth in time experience. The other knows its timeless self and consciously manifests itself in time experience. So, in other words, the supreme consciousness at the universal level knows itself as both, and at the higher level, it knows the timeless, and in the lower, it knows the time experience. That's what Srimbe is saying. There is a clear connection between the two. Okay, so now we go to we have time. We have got 10 minutes. So we can read the next one.
I
We
think,
realize, yeah.
we realize now what the Upanishad meant when it spoke of Brahman as being both the knowledge and the ignorance, and of the simultaneous knowledge of Brahman in both as the way to immortality. Knowledge is the inherent power of consciousness of the timeless, spaceless, unconditioned self, which shows itself in its essence as a unity of being. It is this consciousness that alone is real and complete knowledge because it is an eternal transcendence, which is not only self aware but holds in itself, manifests, originates, determines, knows the temporally eternal successions of the universe. Ignorance is the consciousness of being in the successions of time, divided in its knowledge by dwelling in the moment, divided in its conception of self being by dwelling in the divisions of space and the relations of circumstance. Self present in the multiple working of the unity. It is called the ignorance because it has put behind it the knowledge of unity, and by that very fact is unable to know truly or completely either itself or the world, either the transcendent or the universal reality. Living within the ignorance from moment to moment, from field to field, from relation to relation, the conscious soul stumbles on in the error of a fragmentary knowledge. It is not a nescience, but a view and experience of the reality which is partly true and partly false, as all knowledge must be, which ignores the essence and sees only fugitive parts of the phenomenon. On the other hand, to be shut up in a featureless consciousness of unity, ignorant of the manifest Brahman, is described as itself also a blind darkness. In truth, neither is precise darkness, but one is the dazzling by a concentrated light, the other the elusive proportions of things seen in a dispersed, hazy, and broken light, half missed, half seen. The divine consciousness is not shut up in either, but holds the immutable one and the mutable many in one eternal, all relating, all uniting self knowledge. This is completely the Isha's.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. He's talking of the Isha Upanishad. Yeah. Okay, so that's exactly what we realize now, what the Upanishad meant. He is not mentioning Isha, but it is the Isha Upanishad that is mentioned. In other words, Vidya and Avidya are only nomenclatures. You should not attach any negative value to Avidya. You should not say, it is called ignorance because you are yourself. You have put away the knowledge in the background of your consciousness and you are in ignorance. That is, you can define it as seeing the many and thinking that that's the only reality. Okay. Whereas, somebody is calling me, I don't know, right? We'll see this one. So, he's saying that, now what he's saying is very interesting here, okay? He's saying that the Supreme just wants to see things by itself. It decides to see in two ways. When it decides to see only the one, okay, it is not seeing the many. And when it is seeing the many, then it is not seeing the one. Because, but it is not that it is incapable. It is capable, but it is putting it in the background. Like, you know, if I have two jobs to do, I'll do it one by one. And I'm doing the first job and the second one, I'm saying, wait. I've filed it and I will look at it secondly. Okay. Now he's saying something very interesting. He's saying that when you are looking at the second one and putting away the knowledge and you are seeing only the physical world, is it that you can very easily get the knowledge also? That's the interesting part he's saying. He's saying, no, it is not like that. It is that you really are in ignorance. Okay. So it's a very, now gradually he's coming step by step. See, he's saying that purposely you have entered into the avidya, the capacity to see the many and not the one. But now it has to get back the knowledge, but with great difficulty. So, very interesting what he's saying. Because the Supreme Soul has decided that I want to see both. I want to see the one and I want to see the many. But when I am seeing the many, I have put away the knowledge of the one in the background. But is it that that background can easily be attained? So they're saying no. Okay, he's saying that it becomes very difficult to get that one back again. And that is the whole process of yoga. So how interesting what he's saying. Huh? So because purposely you want to forget the knowledge of the one. It is not that it is imposed on you. It is your own. It's an adventure. It's not a pretension. That's exactly what Sri Aurobindo says also to Niruddha. Niruddha is telling him, you are an avatar. What is so easy for you to do? Okay. So they say, what nonsense you are talking? If that is there, if that is the truth, then what is the purpose of the avatars coming down? He is showing human beings how to conquer the ignorance. And it's a real ignorance. It is not something imagined or something pretended. It is real. That's what he's saying. Look, now we read the sentence, you will understand that. Okay? Now, we realize now what the Upanishad meant when it spoke of Brahman as being both knowledge and the ignorance, and of the simultaneous knowledge of Brahman in both as the way to immortality. So, I'm going into the Isha Upanishad when it says that when you are in the ignorance, avidya, you see the many and you don't see the one. When you go to the one and you see only the one and not the many, that also is an ignorance. So you must know both, and that you can go only to the third level, and there you will know both together. That is the true knowledge. Okay? That is the vidya which combines vidya and avidya. But vidya and avidya don't give wrong. They are only names. Okay. It reminds me of a very interesting thing. Okay. There's a girl here whose name is very strange. Okay. She's a very good girl. But her name is not Sunanda. Her name is Kunanda. So this is exactly what Krishna is saying. She feels very bad about it, but this is very, very relevant to what I'm saying. She is not, she is called Sunanda, Kunanda. So I told her, no, I'm going to call you only Sunanda. It is purposely you have given the name. So it's only a nomenclature. The girl is a good one. It's not that she is bad. Okay. So, his ignorance is, it's a nomenclature. It's only a name that you're giving. There's no reality to it. It is not negative. It is something positive. I am limiting myself to see only the many. Okay? That's the interesting part. So now see, we read again carefully, you will see that. We realize now what the Upanishad meant when it spoke of Brahman as being both knowledge and ignorance, and of the simultaneous knowledge of Brahman in both as the way to immortality. Which is that? That is the third level. Okay. Knowledge is the inherent power of consciousness of the timeless, spaceless, unconditioned self. Level 2, that is knowledge, which shows itself in its essence as a unity of being. You are in the cosmic consciousness and you see everything connected. That's one way of seeing. It is this consciousness that alone is real and complete knowledge, because it's an eternal transcendence which is not only self-aware but holds in itself, manifests, originates, determines, knows the temporally eternal successions of the universe. Ignorance is the consciousness of being in the successions of time. You are in time, you are not outside time. Divided in its knowledge, you are seeing the many. By dwelling in the moment, not in eternity. Divided in its conception of self-being by dwelling in the divisions of space and the relations of circumstance. Very clear? Relations is all in the relations in the physical world only. Okay, so that's what it's saying. Now, just 1 second. I think I have lost it. Yeah. It is called the ignorance. There, very clearly somebody saying, it is called the ignorance because it is put behind it the knowledge of unity by its own choice. It has put behind it, okay, the knowledge of unity, and by that very fact is unable to know truly or completely either itself or the world, either the transcendent or the universal reality. You see what he's saying? He's saying that when you decide to see only the many by your own will, but when you are seeing only the many, you become incapable of seeing the reality, the one. So it's your own choice. It's not that it is somebody else's choice being put on you. Living within the ignorance from moment to moment, from field to field, from relation to relation, the conscious soul stumbles on in the error of the fragmentary knowledge. So there you are. When you decide to see only the one, that's fine. It's your own will that you're doing that. But then you do lose. And that you do, loss also is intentional in a fragmentary knowledge. Let's see the footnote. Okay. And go to the and see the footnote. Yeah. He is quoting the Upanishad. He is also quoting the Mundaka Upanishad. Avidyayam antare vartamana, the one who are living in the avidya, okay. Janghanyamana pariyanti mudha andenaiva niyamana yathanda. Is a blind being led by the blind. He is translating. Living and moving within the ignorance, they go round and round, stumbling and battered, men deluded, like the blind led by one who is blind. So this is the, you have purposely selected to be in that consciousness. It is not something imposed on you. That's the interesting part. But you can know again the one, but you have to make a huge effort. Okay, that's the thing. But it is purposely, it is you yourself who have decided to do that. Again, I remind you of the Narad's knowledge in Savitri. When Narad comes down and says, Savitri has chosen Satyavan, but he's going to die in 1 year's time. And then the queen starts howling in pain and saying, what is this? Why is this being imposed on us? So Narad tells her, you yourself have decided to come down into ignorance and suffering. So don't complain. Make the effort and go up. That's exactly what is being said here. Okay? So, it is not a nation's. So, a very clear statement. The ignorance is not a permanent nation's, but a view and experience of the reality which is partly true and partly false. You want to see it in that way. You yourself have decided that I want to see in many, many ways. I don't want to see the reality only in one way. I want to see the full reality. I want to see the opposite of the reality. I want to see also something which is in between the two. Okay? You're doing that by your own choice. But when you are doing that, you are submitting yourself to the limitation which is real. It's not imagined. That's what he's saying. Living within the ignorance from moment to moment, from field to field, relation to relation, the conscious soul stumbles on the error of the fragmentary knowledge. It is not a nation's, but a view and experience of the reality which is partly true and partly false, as all knowledge must be, which ignores the essence and sees only fugitive parts of the phenomenon. Fugitive, that which is running away, that which is temporal. Fugitive parts. A fugitive is one who runs away. Okay, you can't catch him. So this is also he very interesting phrase he's using. Fugitive parts. The reality has run away when you are in the lower consciousness. On the other hand, to be shut up in a featureless consciousness of unity, ignorant of the manifest Brahman, is described as itself also a blind darkness. This is the Isha Upanishad very clearly. In truth, so if you are at the level 2 of the spiritual planes of consciousness, you are seeing only the one, and you are seeing the many as either false or illusion, total unreality. Okay? In truth, neither is precisely darkness, but one is the dazzling by concentrated light, level 2, the other the elusive proportions of things seen in a dispersed, hazy and broken light, half mist, half seen. Even the spiritual planes of consciousness is half mist, half seen. So what is the reality? Level 3. You have to go to level 3. The divine consciousness is not shut up in either, but holds the immutable ones and the mutable many in one eternal, all radiating, all uniting self-knowledge. So divine consciousness is level 3. That's very clear what his statement is. No? So I think we have 39. We have gone 4 minutes beyond our time. Okay. So very interesting discussion. He's going step by step and taking suppositions and hypotheses and discussing it. So his idea finally is the Vedantic knowledge. That there are 3 levels. 1, ignorance. 2, knowledge. But knowledge also is an ignorance if you don't know both. So you have to go to the 3rd level to know both. Okay. So we close today. Okay.
Thank you, Rangada.
Rangada.